And we're back looking at the Constitution line by line. I'm Don Frazier.
I'm Paul Fabrizio. Was that a Z you
Line
did?
by line. Like Zorro.
Zorro, okay. So we're on the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, and we're on the fourth part of the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah, and I said my name was Don Frazier. Did you say Paul Fabrizio?
I am Paul Fabrizio.
Yeah, you just got into my line thing.
Well, I got a kick out of the Z. All you're missing was the sword.
It's a Z.
Canadian, too. Yeah. All right. Are you ready?
Ready. What's our line?
Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So what?
Life, liberty, and property.
Yeah.
Without due process of law.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Because that was the original draft of the Declaration of Independence. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness was life, liberty, and property. And then got struck.
And life, liberty, and property, of course, goes back to John Locke.
Yes, it's Lockean political theory.
Yeah, in his second treatise on government, 1688, he talked about that. That's his words.
Yeah.
And then used by the framers of the Constitution, Thomas Jefferson, in the Declaration, and then...
But got modified in the Declaration, but he made it into the Fifth Amendment.
And then it comes back here.
Life, liberty, and property.
Okay,
without
Don.
due process.
Take it away, and then I'm going to add a little comment to it, too.
Well,
by the way, due process. That's what we are.
Yes.
Talking about guarantee of procedures.
Yes, procedures.
Yes.
And so there was some concern during the great split in the nation in the 19th century about property being seized without due process.
Okay.
And ultimately, that due process is laid out in the Confiscation Acts, that if you're in rebellion, we're going to take your stuff and there's your process. But before that, they were concerned about the abolition of slavery and whether or not that slave property would be taken away without some sort of compensation or other due process.
Okay.
And so this actually has a lot to do with some of the anxiety among property owners in which they owned a certain species of property, humans, that they didn't want to be deprived of without some sort of due process, which they insisted in many cases should involve compensation. You know,
Okay.
we've heard in the debate recently that there are candidates for the presidency that would like to have a gun buyback
Right.
process. So you're being compensated for your property, and so there is a due process in which that'll take place. None of that was really offered to Southern slave owners. So that was part of the anxiety. Anyhow, you had something to say about this?
No, was it even debated?
At one time it was, but the question was, where's the money going to come for this slave buyback program?
Right.
And it's going to be tax dollars, and then all the northern states that didn't have slaves said, well, not our tax dollars.
Yeah.
Instead, we would rather have a generation of our children slaughtered on the fields of Gettysburg and Vicksburg and places like that.
But of course,
we're not going to pay for it.
But of course, that would also involve then the Northerners buying human beings.
Well, providing the tax dollars for the government to essentially do compensated manumission.
Yeah. So, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
The point I want to look at is totally different.
Yeah, good.
Okay. And this is, you can't be deprived of your life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
Correct.
That means you can be deprived of your life, liberty, and property with due process.
Correct.
The argument here is very simple. Those who are opposed to the death penalty have to confront the fact that the Constitution allows for the taking of life if you have due process.
Interesting.
And so it is a struggle. On the current Supreme Court, there's 4 justices who are generally opposed to the death penalty. 2 of them are totally opposed to it. But the other 2 say, well, the Constitution
That we have sworn to defend and uphold.
actually allows for it. And there it is right there. If you can't be deprived without due process, then logically you can be deprived of life, liberty, and property with due process.
I wonder about
that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, this is one of those things that opponents of the death penalty here in the United States have to confront. And there's various interpretations of it, but it's one of those things that's there. It seems that on the face of it, the Constitution is in favor of the death penalty.
Because mostly you hear about cruel and unusual punishment,
Right.
which is coming up.
Right.
But I hadn't really thought about this application of it.
Yeah, the Fifth Amendment says, something else.
Yeah.
Okay. So there you go. Due process.
And due process is important.
Yes. The government, we all need to realize that the government has power. The government has force. And we as citizens are subject to that, even though it's a government of we the people, by the people, for the people. The government in the end has power. They have bigger weapons than anything we have.
Sure.
But they have to follow the rules.
Unless you have a well-regulated militia, then they don't necessarily have bigger and better weapons. Saying.
They still have the B-1 bomber, okay?
Well, that's true.
Okay. So they have to follow the rules. They absolutely have to follow the rules. And when they don't follow the rules, that's when you have trouble. And under the Constitution, you have recourse against them.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's our line.
That's our line.
So much we could do with that, but I think we've kind of wrapped it up nicely. All right, so that's our line. We're coming in with the fifth part of the Fifth Amendment next time.